My dad and I bootstrapped it up until 13 stores. We didn't raise any capital. And being born in Silicon Valley, obviously, you get into this ecosystem of entrepreneurship and investors, innovation and technology. So these were all of our customers and they became friends.
Jacob Jaber is the co-founder of Philz Coffee, a beloved coffee chain that has nearly 80 locations across California and Chicago. In this episode, we talk about how Silicon Valley's most famous angel investors helped Jacob scale Philz.
Coffee. His name is Naval Ravikant. He's the founder of AngelList and very successful guy. A lot of wisdom too.
Why Jacob doesn't view Philz as a coffee company.
When my dad and I started a hospitality company wrapped as a coffee company.
And how to truly build a brand with your brick and mortar business.
You have to be famous for something.
What's the story of Philz? What is it and how to get going?
So my dad came to the States when he was like 15 and saved up enough money and opened up a little bodega grocery store in the Mission District in San Francisco. And it was about 1800 square foot convenience store. And that's kind of what he knew, because when he came here, he started to work in these types of stores and just eventually wanted to open up his own. So that's how it all started. And that was actually where the original Philz, it converted from a bodega to a coffee shop. That was in the 70s, and it turned into a Philz in the early 2000s. I was helping my dad when I was a kid, like 8, 9 years old. I started helping him out at the bodega, standing on top of milk crates, ringing people up at the cash register, stocking inventory. And the area was amazing because there were so many different types of people from all walks of life. So you really were able to develop your interpersonal skills and how you connect with others and develop rapport in a very short amount of time with different types of people. So I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about retail and merchandising, counting change back. I got good at math. I was working with my dad after school and I learned a lot. But that store eventually transitioned to the first Philz because my dad wanted to do something more than selling the products he was selling. We used to sell like cartons of eggs. I remember it was like 89 cents a carton at that time. We would have promotions for like 49 cents for a dozen, and wine and tobacco and Snickers bars and pet food and all that sorts of stuff. And he was always interested in who the community was, who the people in the community were. And the community was changing and developing. And he wanted to make sure he adjusted the products to best serve the community. But he also loves hospitality. We come from a culture of hospitality and warmth and service. And a lot of the products that were being sold were not necessarily conducive to relationship building and connection. So that's where coffee came from. And we started experimenting with it in the corner of the bodega. Slowly, people started loving it. Slowly, we started replacing aisles of stuff with couches from our house because we didn't have money to buy furniture. And then slowly it became very organically the first Philz. And again, it took many years before it actually started taking off, but we were very confident in it and we were doing something different and we're passionate about it.
And today, can you kind of set the tone as far as where Philz is at in terms of locations and just maybe some key milestones? I know there's a TechCrunch article, you guys raised some money at one point to expand, and we'll obviously bring people from that first bodega that converted to Philz to how you got to where you are today. But yeah, just so people understand like the scale of the company.
I think roughly at 80 locations now and considered one of the largest independent third wave coffee companies in the country. And we raised a few rounds of capital, but actually my dad and I bootstrapped it up until 13 stores. We didn't raise any capital. We slowly grew and we were using the cash flow from the locations to open up the next location and weren't really paying ourselves much. And that's how we grew. And being born in Silicon Valley, obviously you get into this ecosystem of entrepreneurship and investors and innovation and technology. So these were all of our customers and they became friends, some of them. So naturally, they're like, wow, there's always lines out the door. You guys should raise some money and expand and accelerate growth. And obviously, I'm ambitious and I loved what we were doing and I thought more communities should have it. We were apprehensive at first, but eventually we raised our first round of capital and then our second round and our third round, and that allowed us to do all sorts of stuff and accelerate growth, hire people, invest in a state-of-the-art facility where we're roasting all the coffee beans. Yeah, and I mean, there's so much in between, but
Yeah.
fast forward, I mean, there's no experience like Phil's today, even today.
Yeah.
It's
I
highly
mean,
differentiated, and it's all we do one cup at a time, pour over drip coffee, and we do it really, really well. And that's it. We
yeah.
don't do any espresso.
I remember my first time going, which is back in 2019. I was out at a franchise conference in California, and we went to a Phil's, and I got some. I wasn't even a big coffee drinker at this point, but the team I was with, they wanted to go because one of them was from California. I was like, oh, like Phil's is the best. And yeah, I got some like rose petal coffee, like infused
Yeah,
coffee.
iced
It
coffee
was
rosé.
okay, yeah. It was
Yep.
good. And I remember walking out and having that. And just, damn, I've never had anything like this before.
Even men love roses. Roses,
Yeah,
roses are
I
good.
I felt weird ordering it. And I'm not just saying this. I mean, I recall the barista talking with me as they're doing the pour over and making sure, even waiting for me to sip it to make sure I enjoyed it. And I was so confused because growing up in New Jersey and living in New York City at the time, that's not the culture. It's like, take your coffee and get out.
Yep.
Right? So you guys clearly, and it's recent enough where the culture that you and your father built definitely permeated throughout. So yeah, you want to talk about the 0 to 1 days. Are you guys just simultaneously experimenting with these different flavors while letting customer service be your North Star? Or how did you guys think about it in those early days?
In the early days, our menu was six things, so it was hyper focused,
Okay.
and all of the blends were created by my dad. And I was running the business. I started running the business at 18 years old when we had one store, and my dad gave me that opportunity, and we worked together. We were literally baristas for many years together, hustling, serving, and creating relationships and products. So that's how it started. And I would say that there is a real deep innate passion for hospitality and customer service that we had that really lended itself well to the service model and the experience that we created, which is one cup at a time. You don't start with the cashier, you start with us. You walk up to the bar, you order, we connect with you, we try to understand what you like. We make it for you literally on the spot, fresh, and then we ask you to try it, take a sip to make sure it's perfect. There was so much depth in that experience and participation from the customer that it created some sort of magic and loyalty. And we got to know every single one of our customers. Of course, as the stores got busier, it's a little harder to do, but that's how it all started. And we always used to tell customers to come again and tell a friend. So that's how it started. And it took a few years for us to start getting to the point where there were literal lines out the door 7 days a week. It wasn't overnight.
The role of the small menu. Did you guys, just being in California, take any inspiration from like an In-N-Out and just think, hey, if we're going to serve a product, it has to be phenomenal, so we're going to narrow the scope? Or was it just a function of you guys were the only baristas and didn't have any other support?
I think it was more about everything on the menu had to earn its place. It wasn't like we're trying to hit a magic number. It was just about creating something delicious that we love. And that was just six things at the time.
Okay.
So it was as simple as that. I don't think maybe subconsciously In-N-Out played a role, but I don't think so. I think it was more just we only want to serve stuff that we love. And it's so true because you should start with what you really love and share that because you can sell it much more easy and it's more authentic, it's genuine, and like that was one of the rules we had is we're not putting anything on the menu that we don't love ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's where the six came from. But I think it was a pretty good number. It allowed for enough variety balanced with enough simplicity to help us focus. And honestly, we didn't really let anybody order. We told them what they should have. And there was also magic to that. You never go to a bar and you kind of sense the bartenders are super passionate. They know what they're doing and they ask you some good questions, which gives you the confidence that they are trying to identify what you'll like, and then they take control. And I'm like, I'm going to make you something. I feel like I know what you're going to like. And you just let go, and you're like, that's perfect. I'll do that. And you try it, and you're most of the time you're just super delighted and surprised by, maybe not even surprised, but just super delighted by the flavors and how it matches your taste. We took that same approach and we just asked a few questions because our menu was different, our experience was different. We didn't expect anybody to understand. People were used to ordering lattes at Starbucks and Pete's Coffee, and when they see this bar and this drip bar and these unique names like the tantalizing Turkish, the aromatic Arabic, the Philharmonic, the Jacob's Wonder Bar, the Tesora, like these are all, what are these? People didn't know. So we, I think, were wise enough to, at the time, thankfully, recognize that we had to do the ordering for customers. But we always asked questions. We wanted to make sure. My dad will always say the best coffee, like anything, is the thing that comes to your taste. So, in the least amount of questions, we want to find out what's your taste and craft that. We were really good at that. There were some things we weren't good at, but we were very good at that.
And fast forward to a few years, you said it took for you guys to get to the point to have lines out the door. How do you think about that today, as far as you see brands like Crumble or Dave's Hot Chicken, or even locally here in the city in New York, there's some bagel shops like Pop-Up Bagels or Apollo Bagels that can seem to manufacture this virality where they get lines out the door. But like a lot of things in life, easy come, easy go. Yeah, how do you think about really building a concept like that? And can it be manufactured, or do you just have to, my belief is you have to earn it with time, like just slowly build that word of mouth. It's not a software startup that you can like blitz. The reputation has to spread, and it's very hard to do that fast, but I'm curious for your thoughts.
I'm a big believer in that quality is the only thing that lasts. So something has to be genuinely useful and genuinely good to enough people to last. I think that's a principle that will never go away. Now, what you're seeing is perhaps some brands being able to deliver on that with a fashionable outfit, i.e., the branding, the modernized, fresh approach that attracts people to come and try it and share it. So that creates some sort of virality and excites people to go and try it. So that's good, right? Like you got to get people to try it. But more importantly is after they try it, are they like, this is amazing? Do they truly love it, right? Was there a emotional connection, not just a culinary connection, but emotional connection to it? And if that's the case, that person's likely going to come back. One of the things I always pay attention to is not first-time sales, but repeat sales. What percentage of sales are from repeat customers? And then how often are people coming back? I always talk about my favorite metric in the business is usage intensity. It's like the metric is love. How do you define love? You define love by usage intensity. Discretionary usage intensity. Not like a plumbing bill. You have to pay your plumbing bill no matter what. You don't have to pay your coffee bill. That depends on if you like it or not. So I'm always looking for that. But yeah, I think you see that with maybe like pop-up bagels and a few others. The question always comes down to, because there's naturally when there's going to be people that do the same thing, and you see 5 different versions of pop-up bagels pop up. So the question is not who's going to win in the short term, but who's going to be around in 10, 20, 30 years. That's the real measure of success, in my opinion. We had so many competitors at Philz, it was unbelievable. And it was so amazing to us that so many of our competitors focused on all the competitors, whereas we stayed, maybe out of ignorance, but stayed laser focused on the customer. We just didn't care what was going on. People would ask us all the time about others, like, oh, someone else came up that's doing this or that, or what do you think of Starbucks? We just don't know. We're just focused on making sure we're doing a great job. So I think there's something to that as well, is there is something to staying focused on delighting your customers and not getting sidetracked by your competitors. And it's the same thing in the stock markets, right? There's FOMO, there's a little ego, there's a little envy, there's all these things that are, as Charlie Munger would say, liquor, leverage, and ladies are dangers, dangers to success. I think the same is true in running a business like this.
Yeah, I love that usage intensity. That's just an interesting way to measure the how successful a company is at a moment. And scaling to 13 locations, you said you bootstrapped it with your father. And given the fact that you guys do have a different operating model, right, with no espresso, one coffee at a time, in an era where convenience is more and more important, it's pretty impressive that you guys have been able to stick to that. And also, given that this is primarily a franchise podcast, but obviously I like to branch out to all brick and mortar. For a franchise, the playbook is everything, the operating playbook and the handbook. So how much did you and your father have to dial in the operating model for Philz to make sure that obviously customers are going to wait more for a Philz coffee than probably a Dunkin' or other coffee shops, but how much time did you guys spend on really perfecting that? And we'd love to hear the full minutia, right? Like, did you design the stores a certain way so the lines almost flow in a certain direction? And what was that process like for those first 13 stores?
The reality is that there are 100 things that are important to get right on your scaling journey. But the truth is that there are really only a handful of things that are the most heavily weighted out of those 100 things, right? So the design of the store is super important, but I would argue it's not the most important. The type of furniture we used is super important, but not the most important. So we really had to identify what was really, really important that we had to get right. Because imagine if that there are 5 really, really important things and 95 important things. If we missed on any of the 5 really important things and got all the 95 important things right, it wouldn't matter. It would be wrong. Even if we got 4 out of 5 of the really important things right, and a good chunk of you really have to have the judgment to identify what really matters in the business and the customer experience as well as the culture. So I think one of the things we learned very early on, and the good news for us, is that there are 2 things that really mattered the most for us. Number one was the people, the type of people we hired, how we trained, how we led, the culture. So much of the Philz experience was reliant on the quality of the personality and the values and the connection of the people. The product was already done for them. They just needed to follow the recipe. But they did need to have a little bit of good judgment to sense the portions to craft the drink with that was perfect for that customer. So that was important. Hospitality can obviously be taught, but for the most part, it's innate. And I always used to say, you'll know if someone's going to be great at service right when you interview them, not afterwards, because it doesn't take a lot of training to have good presence and eye contact and a good pleasing personality and saying, hi, oh, hey, I'm Jacob. What's your name? Oh, it's great to meet you. Awesome. Do you live around here? Someone who can spark that sort of conversation. So the people piece was really important, and that's deconstructed into how we hire, how we train, how we lead, and the day-to-day connection with the people. So that's number one. And then the second thing that was really important is the real estate, having the right location. It's very important, particularly for an industry like ours in coffee, where convenience is a huge, huge factor in consumer decision making. So you have to have the right location. So if we get the right people and we get the right location, those are the most important things. And even if we were like just okay on all the other 98 things, we'd still, I think, be fine. But we got those 2 things right. And we knew they were the right ones because real estate took us a few locations, but the people piece was from day one because we were the baristas. We were intimately immersed in that. By the way, we were a little crazy, very obsessed on all those things I talked about as it relates to people, how we hire. I think I interviewed the first 500-600 baristas, and I was still afraid to let go at that point. I used to interview people while I was making coffee and working. You got to go to great lengths to make sure you get the most important things right. And a lot of people miss on, they don't have the right judgment on what are the 5 things that are the most important. So I don't know if that addresses your question, but those are some thoughts.
No, it does, man. It sounds similar to the 80-20 rule, right? Or in this case, though, maybe it's like 20% of the factors determining 80% of the results. Maybe it's 5% of the factors determine 90+% of the results.
I think it might be. Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as the people, because you really clearly that's a massive factor here. And pretty much for every small business, labor is a constraint and arguably the most critical component. And I always, with what my business partner and I are doing with Fran Dogs, where we help people buy franchises, anyone who's new and never owned a business, that's a big thing we say is you're going to have to oversee a labor force and you're going to be in charge of them and you're going to be interacting with them every day. So just being prepared for that reality. But did you develop any specific questions or framework for how to get a gauge for people? Because based on what you said, it seemed like almost just, for lack of a better word, vibes. like, hey, I can just feel out if
Yeah.
they're going to be if they have that hospitality gene in them. But yeah, did it go deeper than that, or was it really just you were the barista, you and your father, and you guys could just tell if someone had it or didn't have it?
I think it definitely is all vibes in the beginning, just meeting and feeling that connection. And then you learn, right? You make mistakes, you learn that someone may have sold themselves a certain way, and then you get a little bit better and you iterate and you read. Interviewing is not the best, necessarily the best way to assess someone. Working with them is the best way to assess someone. So ideally, you try to make the best decision you can in the interview process and you keep getting better at it. And I'm also not a big fan of all of these predetermined questions that you have to follow during the process. I do think it's helpful to identify what some good questions are to ask, as well as what you think the right traits are to look for, only so that you can go back and assess was your decision relative to what you were looking for and how it actually played out correct for your own learning. I think that's important. But during the actual interview process, you shouldn't be so monolithic and rigid that you can't flex and make it natural, particularly in the hourly workforce. People don't want to feel like a number. You want to make that connection. I think that's important. But yeah, I mean, for us over time, what we identified as the two traits that mattered a ton was kind and driven, being kind and driven. Someone who was kind was, are they going to pick something up off the floor when no one's looking, like a little wrapper and throw it away because it doesn't look right on the floor? Are they going to go out of their way to open the door for someone? Are they going to have the judgment and the care to bring over a napkin because they notice the table is going to be a little bit messier? Bring some extra napkins. That's the kind part. And then the driven part is someone who wants more out of life, someone who's hungry for something better. And that shows up in terms of their eagerness, their ambition, the quality of their listening and how they ask questions, all those things. So we learned that those two traits eventually correlated to a good team member at Philz, but candidly, that was probably a decade after we started. So I wouldn't stress too much about trying to perfect the interview process. I would stress more about making sure you hired the right person, which you should know after a few weeks or less.
I definitely agree on the flexibility over rigidness. I think it just, you can end up missing a lot of key details if you're not willing to be flexible in those interviews. But jumping ahead to the expansion. So you have 13 locations, you decide to take on capital. I want to really just key in on what made you feel you were ready for the capital, because I think a lot of brands, whether it's they start to franchise too early before they have their playbook figured out, or raising capital before they're actually ready to deploy it and have a clear model ironed out. Was there any key indicators that you and your father saw within the Philz, your 13 Philz locations, that told you, yeah, like it's time, we can now expand a little faster?
There wasn't a clear marker for that moment. There was certainly organic build up blended with ambitions to grow, as well as things we wanted to do investments wise that we didn't have the means to do it with. So those all played a role, but the environment was significant. I can't say that we would have raised capital if we started in another part of the country, maybe. It really depends. It's hard to say. But, and we didn't need it. We had so many people that were interested, and we just decided to go with a certain group. And we also got a lot of amazing angel investors along the ride who were fans and customers. And that was the most exciting part, frankly, is being able to give those people a chance to be part owners in the company. But I developed a relationship with someone amazing, both competent and a great human. And I used to make him coffee. His name is Naval Ravikant. He's the founder of AngelList and very successful guy. A lot of wisdom too. People should go follow him if you don't follow him. A lot of people already follow him. But I used to make coffee for him sometimes, and then we developed sort of a friendship. And I would tell him, like, hey man, there's like all these guys that want to give us money to grow and expand, and I'm a little concerned or worried about it, and I'm not sure how to do it. And he was like, I'll help you out. I'll walk you through the whole process. So he literally helped side by side, partnered with me, and helped me get the Series A done. From identifying people to negotiating to completion. I used to go visit him at the AngelList office in San Francisco to go over the slide decks, to go over the terms, and he was fantastic. So I'm forever grateful to Naval, and we're still connected, but I didn't do this before. I didn't know. So he helped, but there wasn't a clear marker. And I guess having him also on the side helped make the whole process a little easier. I don't think if I had him on the side, I would have gone through it, particularly because I kind of know my limits of knowledge, and I don't like to get into territory where I don't have confidence. So we did our first round, I think it was 2013-ish, and then we did our second 2015. We had actually multiple offers, but our existing investors wanted to step up and get in again. And then we had a third, I think that was in 2016, 2017. We raised probably over 100 million. I think it's public, so you can see that, but I think it was something around that number. So quite a bit of money, but the business is growing fast and doing really well. And we also took great care in trying to find the best investors we could and get more fans and angel investors along the ride as well. But candidly, there's a lot of watch outs for raising money. One of the watch outs is that when you don't have a lot of resources, you're forced to be creative. You have these constraints, real constraints. Whereas when you have capital, raise capital, you get a little looser. You can get a little fat. You have to like try to create artificial constraints, which just don't exist. It doesn't work. There's either real constraints or there's no constraints. And you try to make the best calls you can. But I think that was key. And also the good thing is that we were already established, our DNA and our ethos. When we had partners come in, that foundation was set. That's always a risk I tell people, is be cautious about raising capital too early from certain people. So be careful about that. You want to make sure you have your DNA and ethos in place. But my advice to people in this industry is to always bootstrap it if you can. And if raising from friends and family, I think is totally fine. Or if there's a great angel out there who's very experienced and can be valuable beyond capital, because really that's a key part of the value is beyond the money, is the skills, the experience, and the knowledge. That's great. But don't go out and do any kind of institutional stuff too early on.
Yeah, I think most people would be hard pressed to find as good an angel as you got as Naval Ravikant. That might be literally the best person on the planet you could have gotten at that time.
I think so. And he's also just an amazing human. He's a great guy.
That's incredible. I didn't know that, and I didn't know you guys raised 100 million. And without getting like too deep into the deal terms, just was it a traditional VC like terms or?
Yeah, we had private equity, we had venture capital. So I don't know what you call traditional, but yeah.
The hypergrowth, blitz scaling type.
No, I wouldn't say there was that tech.
Yes, that's what I'm getting
Yeah,
at.
it wasn't No, I think people around the table knew what type of business it was, and certainly, still growing 20, 30 plus percent, 40% in some case, like still fast growing. But no, I don't think people kind of knew that this is a brick and mortar physical asset. It's a business, requires upfront capex, time, all that sorts of stuff. So no, I don't think there was false expectations necessarily.
That's good. Yeah, I think whenever I hear of, there seems to be a bit of a trend now with small business or service-y type businesses raising. It's outwardly being labeled as VC. I don't know the deal terms all the time, but yeah, it always just makes
Yes.
me weary because I just don't think it's a good fit. I agree with your mindset of bootstrapping, but on the terms of, or just along the topic of scaling, I'm of the belief that early on with concepts, that when you have a, like I imagine Phil's location 1 and 2 and 3, customers love it, right? There's only 3, couple of them can't get this product everywhere, can't get this experience anywhere. So I really believe that scarcity, once you have the quality, as you mentioned, and you're building that affinity, the scarcity keeps the affinity really high. But like any business that grows, it's almost like the Batman quote of you either die the hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Like, how did you deal with mentally that possibility of, as Philz is scaling, maybe people will start to criticize us as not being able to maintain that perfect neighborhood mom and pop experience? And then I'm sure you actively fought to make sure that every location did keep the mom and pop experience. So could you just walk us through that? Because it's just such a common criticism you see is, oh, they took an investment, they scaled, and now it's not as good, is typically the journey for a lot of
Yeah.
businesses, brick and mortar.
Yeah, I call this the size-stupidity paradox, which
Okay.
is like there's a false sense that size equates to bad. And that may be true in luxury, at least from a perception standpoint, where their goal is to just manufacture desire. For us, is a little different as a coffee. We're not trying to necessarily, we're not in the luxury business. But yeah, the size and stupidity paradox, which is actually what leads to a degradation of quality, a decline in quality, dilution in the brand, is stupid, careless decisions, not necessarily the size. So it is true that you can get a lot larger and maintain your quality. As a matter of fact, improve your quality. And that was our MO. That was our goal. That was what we focused on. And I think we did that in many respects. The key is to continue doing that. And that really depends on the care of the leader. So I think it's more about making sure you're making quality decisions versus worrying about growing and becoming a bigger company. Just bigger necessarily doesn't mean bad. And I think this idea that, oh, you get too big, they're not local anymore, I think that's a little overblown, to be frank. There's the cohort of people who actually are influenced by their purchase decision that believe in that it's so small that it's not. Are the employees treated badly? Is the experience gone down? Is the quality not as good? Those are the things that really matter. Those are when problems arise. So as long as you're not making stupid, careless decisions, I think you're fine. And it is a stupid, careless decisions to prioritize growth over maintaining good standards of quality. In other words, if your quality is going to be sacrificed because of the pace of growth, I would call that stupid and or careless.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's probably one of those situations where it's a minority of customers, but they're the loud minority where,
Yeah, it
where
always
yeah,
is that way.
yeah, they see success and then it's up. They're not local anymore. I don't want to give them business. So it's always just
Yeah.
funny to me how the goal as an underdog, they're rooting for you. They want you to succeed. And then when you succeed and you're really thriving and growing, it's, oh, now they're just this big company. I'm not going to give them my money. But yeah,
You
it's just,
said something really important, actually, and I wrote about this on X once, which is there is some sort of underdog advantage in some respects. There are some spots around the US there's just one location or two Cat's Deli or one or two locations it's just an institution, right?
yeah,
It's the brand is so much bigger than the business.
yeah,
And that's true in some respects. And there's still that sense of time and there's battle scars. They've been in that space for so long. I know the owners. I know the guy that started it. There is some historical advantages to that narrative, that story. I think that is powerful. So to add a little nuance to my previous paradox, I do think there's something to be said for thinking about what that means and what role that plays. And I don't know if the right question is how you maintain underdog status. Maybe I think that's getting close to the right question, but you also can't bullshit your way to it.
Yeah.
So for us, my dad and I have tens of thousands of customer relationships to this day, and we get texts all the time. We go and meet for coffee, we talk with them on the phone, we get feedback. We are spending so much time with customers all the time. They respect us, we respect them, even at 80 stores. And even when we have 100 stores, we're going to know so many customers. So I think that's just because that's who we are, right? So I think so much of it depends on the ownership and what their objectives are. You see many scenarios where new ownership takes over, whoever that may be, and they it gets driven to the ground. And it's slow and incremental in many cases. Some cases it's just very bad, but some cases it's just slow and incremental decline. And the issue is that the numbers may not follow right away, right? The numbers may look better in the short term, but then underneath you're removing the bricks
Yeah.
of the foundation of the brand. Those are just stupid or careless people, owners. So you got to be careful about that. And that exists. It's so sad. There's so many wonderful brands. I think the further a brand gets away from its founding ethos, it's like a 95 plus percent risk that the
Yeah.
brand kind of is maybe not necessarily in decline, but gets highly diluted to the point where it loses its advantage. And there's
Yeah.
not a lot of moats in this type of business, right? It's brand, it's relationship. So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this stuff, but I think back to your point, you said the right thing, which is this underdog sort of thing. I think it's very much worth thinking about as you're scaling. You shouldn't be scared to scale because you think it's going to lower quality. You should be scared of your decision making. You should be careful of your decision making and make sure that's done with quality. And you should also think about how to maintain that.
Yeah.
So those are
Well,
those are some of my thoughts.
totally. And I think if you're starting a consumer facing business in the brick and mortar world, I almost think you should try to like reverse engineer and find some examples like you mentioned, Cat's Deli. There's like a cinnamon bun coffee shop. I think it's in Minnesota. The QSR Sage, Jonathan Mays, if you follow him. He was there recently and he was tweeting about it. I think it's Isle Buns Coffee or something like that.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of it.
Anyway, there's only one of them, and it's known as like the greatest cinnamon bun in the country or something. And I don't know if he was traveling for a conference or whatever, but it's winter and he's out there in the cold, and there's a long line at this place. And so, if I'm ever starting a brick and mortar business, and again, consumer facing, 'cause I think this is totally different in the B2B landscape or businesses like plumbers or HVAC or lawn mowing. But how do you develop that kind of affinity, right? And if you're not doing the things that could lead to that, then I don't know. For me, it's like, okay, I should pause because why wouldn't I strive for my brand to be that beloved? And that is how I believe, as you said, there are examples, and I think it's so cool, where the brand is so much bigger than the actual business. Before transitioning away from Philz, I'd love to hear, because I know you've mentioned a few of these before online, these kind of examples of hospitality. Do you have any favorites of just examples where you guys went the extra mile with the customer?
Oh my God, so many. I mean, I wonder if like Phil's is a hospitality. When my dad and I started a hospitality company wrapped as a coffee company, I wonder if that because we love it so much. One story that's good is there was a customer, husband and wife. He used to work at Twitter actually, and his wife was giving labor in the hospital and went through and he was tweeting, "Oh my God, we're so excited. We could totally use the Phil's right now." We saw it and my dad hand delivered coffee to the hospital, literally
No
like
way.
within the hour. Yeah.
You knew
I
what
think there's
hospital
a
he was at?
yeah, because we
Oh,
DM'd
yeah.
him, and that was fun. There's a banana story I tell sometimes of like used to work at one of the second locations in Mission Bay. There was a customer who used to come in and always complain that there's no bananas. There's a Safeway across the street, but she'd always complain there's no bananas, and I would literally go in the mornings and buy a bunch of bananas and store it at the cash register for her, just for her. So when she came in, she didn't have to go out of her way.
No way. And
I
you
mean,
sold
there are
that at cost, or
yeah, whatever. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't remember, but like, no, we weren't trying to make we were trying to make a bunch of money off the bananas.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah, yeah, $10 for a
yeah.
banana. You know, you want it?
Yeah,
Here you
exactly.
go. That's what it's gonna cost.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
That's a good one. So that was one. There was a manager who an Uber driver never showed up. We found out, we got the address of the customer, she got in her car and she drove it to them. There's so many stories. I can probably write a book on how many stories there are. It's pretty remarkable.
These are great examples, and I love that you kind of called yourself a hospitality company that just happened to sell coffee. But you guys did something more. I mean, you really became cool. This is my outsider's opinion, right? I didn't even discover Philz as I outed myself earlier until 2019. But we could mention that you guys were filmed multiple times in the HBO show Silicon Valley.
Awesome show. Should still
It's
exist.
hilarious. Yeah, love it.
Yep.
And I mean, well, for one, did they ask you? Like, did they reach out to? Yeah, I'm assuming that wasn't one of those whatever you call it, sponsored placements. But can you talk about even just like how that happened, where you became the cool brand that was also beloved? Because I think it's different. There's some brands where it's like you love them, but they're not necessarily cool. To me, it seemed like people wanted to be seen at Phil's.
Well, what do they say? It's not cool to be cool, or it's not cool to try too hard to be cool. I think
Yeah.
there's something true to that. It's so funny. I think some of these things are random, right? The short story is they reached out to us. They were like, lots of people love Phil's. It's ingrained in Silicon Valley culture, and we're doing a show, and we'd love to highlight you guys. And can you send us some products like cups and stuff like that? We're like, sure. That's it. Nothing like we didn't obviously no sponsorship, nothing like that, and it just showed up a lot. But I don't think you should try to engineer your brand or your products to accomplish that. Just let it be random, and I think it is random. If you just do really good stuff and you're also able to make it authentically relevant, people try it and you get lucky and more people try it. There's going to be some people that try it maybe that have a good following that talk about it. And that individual's personality will add some DNA to the brand ethos. And I don't know, it's just very random stuff. But I can tell you less about what you should do to try to be cool and get lucky, but I can tell you more about what you shouldn't do. And one of the things you shouldn't do, you shouldn't start your brand to try to say, I want to have a viral, super cool brand.
Yeah.
That's probably not the best way to do it. You need to be genuinely interested and curious and passionate about something that you want to share with people.
Well, it's funny because maybe now we just jam on it a bit because does seem to be a brand in LA in the brick and mortar world that kind of it seems like they engineered it from the start for that cool factor, which is the grocery store. I'm going to butcher the name. You want to say it?
Erewhon.
Yeah. Can you, because most people outside of California and probably, I don't know, maybe even just outside of LA will have never heard of it. But I think I looked it up. There's about 10 locations. There's tons of YouTube
Yeah.
videos. The store looks, people like depict it as if it's like a golden sparkled store, but it's known as the world's most expensive grocery store. So can you just give us outsiders here and the rest of America, what's the scoop on this grocery store?
Yeah, so Erewhon think of it as a very high luxury grocery store with curated selection of, high standard health, wellness, quality products, unique products as well, clean ingredients, all these sorts of things. So it's a Beverly Hills supermarket, kind of think of it like that. But it's a normal supermarket, and they also have a prepared food and cafe in there. And then they sell these smoothies, and these smoothies, I think they're like $20 a smoothie. You can have lunch there for $80, more or less. It's expensive. And these smoothies are collabs with celebrities. There's like the Hailey Bieber smoothie that went viral, and I can't tell you how they created all these things, but I definitely think the environment has everything to do with it. The fact that it started, it's here in LA, it's in Beverly Hills, it's attracted all these influencers, and it kind of feels like every influencer wants to be there. And then what happens is they all post about it. And then what happens is more people want to go visit. And it's just this circular engine of just more and more people wanting to try it. I do think there is a place in the world for having a super high quality wellness supermarket. I think Whole Foods kind of had that, lost a little bit of that, maybe. So I do think there's an actual useful need for that. Hopefully the prices are more accessible over time. But Yeah, I mean, they've created something magical for sure. There's something special going on there.
Yeah, it's definitely a brand and a business that I'm keen to kind of learn more about in the coming months. But as far as businesses that can build a cult following, or that almost like, I call it like the foreign appeal, right? Like a lot of people on the East Coast, until they've had In and Out, they're kind of obsessed with it because you see someone randomly walking with an In and Out shirt, and you hear maybe your friends are talking about it because they just got back from a trip, and there's something about the branding with the palm trees. It's like classic fast food meets West Coast. Like they really nailed it. But that's a brand, right, with like probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cult following. I'm curious how you think about the level one, which you've mentioned, which is just do good stuff for your customers. But to me, I think there's also an element of this where certain businesses maybe they're not able to really build that customer affinity in the same way. And I think the two biggest factors in it for really building like a viral customer base, or not viral, but customers who have deep love for your business and brand, is like how recurring the product or service can be. And then the surface area for experience. So, and as I'm saying that, like I think Philz hits both of those magnificently, right? Because coffee is pretty habitual as a product. Most people who drink coffee
Yep.
are having it every day. So boom, I could be going to Philz 7 days a week. Like maybe I don't want to do K
Yep.
cups, and I'm just going to hit Philz every single day for my daily cup of coffee. Which I'm an East Coaster. I go to Dunkin' every day, which might be very controversial to some people, but I love Dunkin'. But then the surface area for experiences, I mean, you're literally ingesting it. So it's that feeling I get from your product is going to, in the terms of any restaurant, the food is literally, you're eating it, you're ingesting it. So the surface area for an experience is already high just because it's a consumable. But then for you guys went above and beyond with the baristas and that one at a time personal touch, which is just, I mean, you guys are probably maxed out on both of those factors as far as my framework. And you have concepts, maybe a group fitness class where I think it's pretty high because you can go to a group fitness class multiple times per week. There's music, you have a post-workout high, you have an instructor who makes or breaks the experience in certain ways. That's not as high as a Philz, but it's up there, right? A dry cleaning business or maybe a laundromat. I think it's hard to build brand affinity when it's once a week or once every couple of weeks, and it's commodity service where as long as it's, I don't know, maybe I don't understand it well enough, but I don't know how customer service, there's not much opportunity to like flex a customer service muscle.
Mhm.
Anyway, I'm rambling, but I'm curious for how you think about what categories of businesses maybe have the most opportunity to do what you did with Philz and what we've maybe talked about with some other brands out there in different categories.
One of the interesting things I'm seeing is that I think there's so much innovation in technology. Right now, we have the AI revolution. In food and beverage and brick and mortar, we've reached close to a peak of innovation. So there's less ideas out there. But what you're starting to see is an integration of things. So you're starting to see fashion brands have cafes inside of them because the more dwell time, the more people linger inside of the store, the more affinity, brand affinity opportunity, the more purchase, maybe they make purchases. So I think it's less about thinking in terms of just the categories, but more about the experience, like an integrated experience. Think about like category collaborations.
Yeah.
That's probably the right framing. That's probably what I would think about. If you have a cool shoe brand that you want to launch some stores in, think about what's a harmonious category you can add to that experience. And maybe it's waffles, maybe it's shoes and waffles, for an example. Dry cleaning, you mentioned. I think maybe you could make dry cleaning cool. I don't know how, but I bet you if you and I sat in a room for an hour and thought about it, we can probably come up with some ideas. But the dry cleaning customers probably cares about price, quality, convenience in that order, is what I
Yeah.
would bet.
Well,
So
quality.
you think
What
price,
about,
qual, they do a good job. Like they actually,
yeah, the
it,
clothes come back
the
clean.
clothes came out right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, the clothes came out right. But I would start thinking about how can we actually maximize on convenience? Are there other things that are adjacent to our capabilities that we can do besides just dry cleaning? Can we actually do shoes? Can we, I don't know, I'm thinking out loud, but that's how I would think. I would think in terms of category collaboration, category expansion, But I don't think any goal should be like, I want to go create like the coolest brand and I want it to be viral. And I just don't think, I never seen a scenario where that worked. It's always somebody who's just passionate about, you can certainly be passionate about creating an experience. I think the best ideas are actually hard to describe. Sometimes it's both. Good ideas are simple and easy to understand, but just because something is unclear or it's hard to define what it is, you should not mistaking it for a bad idea because there may
Yeah.
be something in there that's interesting. How to find ideas in this industry, it's not super easy and you can't really force it, but I think people should start thinking beyond the obvious category that they think they want to go into and think about how to integrate things.
Well, that's an interesting idea there to on the integration side. But I definitely do agree with your thought of, you shouldn't try to engineer it. I do think maybe it's worth exploring at a minimum to see if are you doing things that it's even possible. But if you look at all the big companies or most, let's say, well-known or I don't know, these brands with cult followings, they all started with what you said, which is just a quality service, right? Raising Cane's, which has second highest AUV in fast food fried chicken, always been focused on just we're going to do chicken fingers and we want our chicken fingers and service to be the best in the industry. And they've been executing on that for almost 30 years, I think. And then Buc-ee's, which is like this crazy convenience store concept. Founder started is we're going to have cheap ice and clean bathrooms because they started in like the 80s when I don't know, maybe ice was more popular, but I guess it wasn't as cheap as it could have been. And most rest stops are pretty dirty and gross. And now it's evolved into it's not just clean, it's not just cheap ice. They're massive. It's a whole experience. It's a fun roadside stop relative to, again, like before I went to a Buc-ee's, I was used to, it's off the rest stop. It's going to be gross. It's sketchy. I want to get out of here fast. Now it's like they've really made it into a whole experience. And yeah, it leads me to an idea that you said to me before we jumped on this is that the founders should be able to answer the question, what are you known for? So can you expand on that and how maybe it came to you through your work at Philz?
You have to be famous for something. You have to stand for something, I think. Otherwise, you're just not strong enough. I think you could still have pretty good business if you don't necessarily stand for something super strongly, but you should really be famous. What are you known for? Where is your authority? What are you famous for? What are you known for? And I think in this day and age, there's a lot of noise. So it's particularly important to be very clear about what it is you're going to be best in the world at. And sometimes people have a lot of things they want to do. You really have to narrow it down and be focused on one thing. And then over time, you can earn your right to add more stuff. But it's always a question I ask people is, what are you going to be known for? And most of the time, I get the answer that tells me they've never been asked that question because they say a few words and then they add some more sentences to it. And I was like, okay, you should have some clarity there. And they know what it is, but they haven't just articulated it as crisply. But I think you got to be known for something because I think consumers will recognize that. And if you're the best in the world at that, you'll get credit for that. So people should be thinking about that. I don't think you need to have the perfect answer right away, by the way, but I think you should keep asking yourself that question. What are you going to be known for? What's the one thing you're going to be known for?
Yeah, it's definitely worthy of revisiting, maybe as you're in the earlier stages, trying to figure out what lane you're going to carve out for yourself. But I think if a business ultimately can't answer that question after a certain amount of time, you're probably going to see it in the results from your customers. Because if they don't remember you for something specifically that you're doing really well, probably not coming back too often.
Or they've figured it out, but they've never just been asked the question and haven't had enough practice articulating it as nicely. So it is true that you can still, sometimes you'll learn from your consumers what you're known for. But the whole premise and idea of this is, what are you going to be the best at? What is your focus? So literally, you don't need to actually have the perfect answer to that question, but it should express itself in the experience. It should express itself if you're looking at a deck and you're having a conversation with an entrepreneur. It should come through.
And tying it back to Phil's even, is that a reason why you guys never added espresso? Because you're like, nope, like we're doing pour over, drip coffee only.
Yeah, we want to be the best at one cup at a time coffee experience.
Yeah,
That's it.
I love it.
One cup at a time coffee experience.
On along these lines of, let's call it innovative brick and mortar brands and just companies and what they're known for in this space, you mentioned on X or Twitter developing a YC for brick and mortar. So I know you're not as nearly involved in the day-to-day of Philz. You're not a barista anymore by any means, but can you kind of share what you're up to as far as investing in the brick and mortar space?
One of the things earlier we talked about was how helpful it is to have someone who's done it before. I was very lucky and I had that. I seeked that out and I found that in the early days of building Philz, people who just were entrepreneurs who've done it before and just making a connection with them, getting feedback, getting advice versus just like raising money, which on its own is not enough. You got to raise good advice. You got to raise good partnership. So I think and there's so much energy into tech, and there seems to be a much smaller community, at least on X, for brick and mortar and building physical businesses and experiences. I think, and what I've been doing over the past few years is angel investing in some concepts, but more importantly than that, actually being very helpful to the entrepreneurs via text, via calls, meeting, visiting, all these sorts of things, just trying to really help them. And that's been a lot of fun. So what is the value of YC? The value of YC is in its community. There is a bunch of like-minded people trying to do the same thing you are, perhaps in a different space, partnered with a bunch of alumni who've had so much success who you have access to, as well as the partners there who have seen so many companies and startups. And that should exist for brick and mortar, and it really doesn't. So I've been kind of doing it, and I think it's been great. I get a lot of people reaching out. I reach out, and I've been doing that for a little while now. I'm still an entrepreneur at heart as well, so I love creating and building. But yeah, I mean, call it whatever you want, but there should be, a YC for brick and mortar, and I think I'm doing part of it, and hopefully more should join the community.
I'm all on board. I think it's an amazing idea. Do you have what's the name of it? Like Lions?
Humble Lion.
Humble
Humble
Lion.
Lion Holdings, yeah.
Nice.
Humble Lion. That's basically the entity where we do the investments out of.
Cool. It's a question I get periodically from folks is where could I even go if I was interested in raising? And I think, yeah, it's deeper than that too. It's not just about the money, right? It's about maybe, hey, I think I have some things here, but I could use some guidance.
100%. That is exactly right. It's not all about going and raising capital.
Yeah.
It's really about figuring out the pathway. So, to your point, I need some thoughts on this idea. What do you think about it? So it's not just about that. It's really more about helping brick and mortar entrepreneurs come up with the right idea and how to execute it all the way through being a multi-$100 million company. That whole journey.
There isn't a home for where you could find that and that kind of guidance. So I love what you're doing, and I think
But you got to help. You got
yeah, I'm trying to do my part,
help.
man. Yeah, trying to do my part, especially within the franchising world. We're trying to build some better resources and options for owners, and yeah, we got some cool things cooking in the background. But
There's no one more perfect in the world for this than you. I think you are the franchise king.
I appreciate that.
Yes.
Man. Well, look, I think this has been an awesome conversation, and what I'm taking away from it is, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things, but end of the day, take care of your customer and stay focused. Don't get distracted. Don't do too many different things. Make sure that you're letting the 20% or potentially less of the most important things, you're taking care of those so that the majority of the results get taken care of, but by nature of that. And yeah, not getting distracted, right? So focus and take care of the customer.
Yep. And follow ideas that pull you, that interest you. That's really important. Just follow your interests. Don't try to do something else. I think that's so important.
100%.
Ultimately, our companies are expressions of our values. So, and I see a lot of these issues with people just wanting to buy companies. So there's a lot of people wanting to buy like companies and then
The whole
just like
the whole
grow them and just we're going to get a multiple expansion by being a little larger and just aggregating all these things. And I think maybe that can work, but yeah, I don't know. There's something about that doesn't vibe with me totally.
I think it's back to what you said really early on is your 6 items on the menu in the first Philz were because you and your father liked it. So if it's not authentic to you as the founder, leader, everything flows from you onward down. And yeah, if it's not authentic and you're not following the ideas that are, like you said, are pulling you, that will ripple through to the customers in some way, I believe. And you
Yes,
see it play out with different brands in various ways.
100%.
So, all right, that'll be takeaway number 3.
Yeah,
Focus, take
okay.
care of the customer, and yeah, stay authentic.
Follow your interests. Yep.
Yes. Love it,
Good
man.
stuff.
Yeah, man, this was
Thank you so
great.
much, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, we'll have to get you on soon, maybe, or again in a year or two, and we can.
Let's do it. We could do a trio next time. Let's
Yeah,
find
yeah.
another guest.
All right, man. Great
Thank
to have
you.
you on, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.